phase 2 is hipsters, but Campanella calls them.
We're at phase 2, actually. There's phase 2 in Medellin. They have a WeWork space in Medellin. No mames. No mames. Little taco spot. Overpriced tacos. No Mexicans working there.
Persona que hable inglés y si el resto hablan español, de pronto las clases te las dan en inglés.
No mames. The entitlement is crazy. Yo, let's go, no mames. It's Sombra del Piso back once again with another SombraReacts video. Man, I'm so excited. This time around, we sort of edited the overlay, right? We got a little sophisticated. Actually, this is just like middle school type stuff. We don't have access to Photoshop because it costs an arm and a leg to have access to the suite. So we used a little bit of the online services, the myriad free online services out there to edit some form of an overlay, right? It looks okay, right? At the end of the day, we're just trying to do something and get straight to the point. Just make sure that you guys are able to see what's really important. We got the Patreon on the left there. Somebody at Piso, follow me on Patreon, by the way. And if you want exclusive content, you could pay for the Patreon, and then you could see a lot of the special interviews that I do with people here in New York City. So check that out as well. You have the Instagram on the right there. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the SombraReacts. Yo, this one hits home, honestly, because I visited Mexico City, La Ciudad de Mexico. And I didn't really experience this sort of backlash from the locals in terms of like this growing anti-extranjero sentiment. But honestly, it's a thing I could imagine. During the pandemic, a lot of remote workers decided to go down to La Ciudad de Mexico in order to keep their costs of living low whilst enjoying good weather and gentrifying neighborhoods in the process. So it'd just be like that. It happened in Colombia as well. I'm sure it happened to Portugal, parts of Spain, Malaga. So I'm not surprised. Oh, Barcelona and Madrid, actually. So I'm not surprised that it'll happen, you know, in our little backyard, right, south of North America. So like, comment, subscribe, guys. We're gonna get right into it. This one is gonna be a little bit of a long one. It's by a really cool channel, Channel 5 with Andrew Callaghan. I hope I said that correctly. Yep. So without further ado, let's get into it. Look at this. Look at this already. Look.
Hola, ¿hablas español? Hola, ¿hablan español? No speak Spanish?
No.
Where are you from?
What's that?
¿De dónde eres?
A couple streets over.
You're living here in Mexico?
Disrespect. Do you see that? Like, this is the first thing I say all the time. If we're going to another culture, if we're going to another country, right, at least learn some of the basic phrases in the language of that country. Seriously, like we could talk about this forever, but let's just look at what else this documentary is going to talk about. I already could imagine. It's like the foreigners do not want to sort of assimilate. They don't want to talk to anybody, just like how they do here in New York. New York is one of the graveyards of the old New York because of gentrification. Seriously. So I'm sure Mexico City, the Mexicans are fed up with these guys. De verdad, I'm sure.
Mexico?
Yeah, I love Mexico. I don't like the United States.
Okay.
It's much calmer than New York. It's still very natural.
I've had a little bit of Mexican always in my family, but not by blood. But now I basically do internet marketing, remote work, things like that.
The Mexican capital is now considered one of the top 5 cities in the world for remote workers.
Nothing is stopping me from working remotely as long as I'm not earning wages here in Mexico.
Yeah, what would you do if you had that opportunity? You know, I grew up in the States. My family's only been there for 1 or 2 generations also, so, you know, obviously I'm from there, but I feel more comfortable here, to be honest.
This country is more chill. In Russia, everybody is on the rush, everybody is running. Here, it's more chill.
Okay, thanks, bro.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you, eh?
Thank you, nice to meet you too.
It doesn't seem, look, first of all, let's drink some liquid death. It's not actually death via liquid. It's just a name, you know, it's just a provocative name. It's a flavored sparkling water. You know what's funny about a lot of these intermediary interviews that this guy had with the people that he was talking to? None of them were speaking Spanish. None of them were speaking Spanish. We got some guy that's trying to, he just outwardly said that he found a way to subvert the tax system when you are a remote worker. He's not trying to sign up for a tourist visa in the country. And he said he doesn't have to because he's technically only an American citizen and he's earning in American dollars and not earning in Mexican pesos. So he doesn't have to fall under the double taxation. And a lot of these guys that went over to La Ciudad de Mexico during the pandemic do exploit the system in the same way. I think to stay in Mexico, the limit is like 3 months, and then you have to, it's the same thing as Colombia. You can stay up to, what is that, 90 days, and then you could renew your visa to stay an extra 90 days. So in total for 1 year, you can stay 180 days. So what these guys do is that they stay for the 180 days, not paying taxes in Mexico. They're not contributing to the local economy whatsoever. They only keep the money within themselves, right? And then after the 180 days, they go off to maybe another place in Latin America and do the same thing. And then they go back and back and back and back. That's really what they've been doing. It's intelligent in order to subvert the high cost of living that one would be subject to in the United States, in Western Europe, Australia, Canada, so on and so forth. But it's just not fair for the Mexicans, because I could only imagine how much displacement these guys are receiving due to these guys coming in en masse and then offering the landlord 4 to 5 times what the native Mexicans are paying for their monthly rent. There was a very interesting New York Times article. I should have brought it up for this video, but it was just basically talking about this same issue in La Ciudad de Mexico, and the comment section was crazy. It was just a lot of angry Mexico citizens. It was crazy.
Thank you.
Yo, aquí Josué para Channel 5, Canal 5 Latinoamérica. The gentrification in Ciudad de México is a big problem. ¿Qué opina de la gentrificación en México?
Terrible, nos está disparando las rentas de una manera inalcanzable. Ya no vamos a poder pagar renta en la Roma.
I'm gonna tell you something. I sort of contributed to it, but I didn't stay nearly as long as the gentrifiers, right? I visited La Ciudad de Mexico in 2023. Let's listen. You know what? Let's listen to these guys a little bit more, and then
12,000 se fueron a 25,000 pesos. Sí lo están sufriendo mucho.
What do you think about the prices in this zone?
The prices here, pretty comparable to Seattle prices. Yeah, muy caro.
Rent in Seattle is back on the rise. Average rent still more than $2,100 a month for a 700 square foot apartment.
You tasted some tacos?
Sí.
¿Pica o no pica?
Pica, sí.
¿Mucho o no?
En medio, sí.
¿En medio?
Sí.
Okay.
Habanero, sí. Gracias.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
As some of you may have seen, much of our previous coverage has focused on the issues along the US-Mexico border, particularly surrounding undocumented migrants coming from developing nations in Latin America who've crossed our border illegally in search of economic opportunity in the States. Many Americans have complained that this mass influx of migrants is taking away job opportunities from working-class Americans, lowering the bottom line for coal miners and veterans, flooding the streets with crime and violence, and leading to a canine genocide of epic proportions.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the pets.
But what if I told you there's a reverse border crisis going?
Exactly. I already knew that they were going to get to that. Americans tend to complain about the influx of Mexicans into the United States, even though if there were a cancellation of that migration, right, the legal way, there will be no construction projects happening, not only as frequent as possible, but as fast as possible. There wouldn't be a lot of cooks. A lot of the jobs that a lot of Americans don't bother to do, they would be forced to do so because there'll just be a dearth of available positions, right? So the fact that we are going over to the other, and then for most of the times, a lot of the Mexicans, right, the people from Latin America when they come over, because it's not just Mexico they're coming from, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, places in South America like Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peruvians. A lot of the time, these guys integrate into the culture. A lot of them learn English, and then they pay their taxes, so on and so forth. But when we have the reverse, right, these guys going into La Ciudad de Mexico, only specific parts, because the parts that they're going to, Roma Norte, Polanco, Condesa. There's a lot of other areas in La Ciudad de Mexico that these guys can go to. They're only going there because, they're seeing similar faces. And they realize that they don't have to learn English. They don't have to learn Spanish because a lot of the employees there, in order to get the extranjero business, they are speaking English with these guys. It's absolutely disgusting. I'm dead serious. I'm not going to lie. I lent to this to some degree. When I went to La Ciudad de Mexico in el año 2023, I didn't know anything about the place. I really didn't know anything about Mexico. It was my first time, and it was post living in Colombia for 3 months the year prior. So I decided to stay in a place on Roma Norte. And I didn't really know much, man. I was just going around to the restaurants in the area in the beginning. And it was annoying. It was just like as if I was in New York, in Brooklyn, in Park Slope, right? In Williamsburg. It was just the same type of person. Everyone's yelling in English. I swear I thought I didn't even leave the United States. It was so annoying. It was only until I met a local. She helped me out. She knows who she is. She helped, I rented a car. She helped me out. She took me to a lot of places alrededor la ciudad. I visited Toluca. I drove down to Puebla. I had a ball. I tried my best to integrate with the locals. As you could hear, yo lo sé la idioma de español, más o menos. So I was able to communicate. So it was just different. It was just a different experience. I think that if you're gonna go over there, at least learn the language. Please learn the language, and pay the taxes to the Mexican country. It's not hard. It's not difficult. I'm telling you.
That's right, rent and cost of living in Mexico's largest city has doubled and now tripled as a result of Americans. This all really began after the COVID pandemic of 2020, during which tens of millions of Americans working in the tech sector switched to a work-from-home model and no longer had to report to the office in cities like San Francisco and Seattle, where tech companies like Uber, Twitter, Facebook, Microsoft, and beyond are headquartered. So where'd they go? The answer is simple. They went somewhere where their paycheck stretches a lot further. Some chose cities like Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee, but 800,000 Americans have moved to the country of Mexico in the past 4 years, and almost nowhere is their presence felt more than in Mexico's capital.
You see graffiti like this that says "Fuera gringo," which means "Get out, gringo."
Like fuera, like pa fuera, like get out. These guys are really not integrating in the culture. They're not speaking to the Mexican natives, and it's the same problem that we have here in my neighborhood, Prospect Heights. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this place was undesirable, right? We had a lot of violence that happened, crimes, robberies. There weren't a lot of, stores, like nice stores, or they were only like bodegas, right? So now it's completely different. It's a completely different demographic that is the majority in Prospect Heights and Crown Heights. And they do not talk to any of the natives. They don't talk to any of the originals. The original people, the OGs that's been here for a while, they just really hang out in their little groups. It's the same thing that's happening in La Ciudad de Mexico. It's crazy that happened because it happened already, and this is getting worse and worse and worse. I would love to live in La Ciudad de Mexico because I had a really good time. I have friends over there. There's a girl I met in Colombia the year prior to the trip that the year prior to the year that I went to Mexico City. I met her in Colombia, and her family lives in Toluca. And so I visited them. I got to know them. It was fun. We all spoke in Spanish. They gave me pozole. Like, it was fire. Tacos, it was fire. And I busted them at Domino's twice. Some of that piso isn't a case. But it was fun. I was trying to do activities to integrate into the culture because I am interested in learning about the traditions of Mexico. These guys, the problem is that they walk around like they own the place. They're spending high amounts of money for rent, validating the landlords to maintain that inflated price and pushing out the natives that lived in these neighborhoods in La Ciudad de Mexico for decades. It's crazy.
Much like the current situation at our border, if done right, this wouldn't be a bad thing. After all, tourism accounts for 17% of Mexico's GDP. Much like immigrant labor, documented or undocumented, accounts for 19% of the American workforce. But this rapid, mass influx of what are called digital nomads to Mexico City has overwhelmed the housing market there to such a degree that native-born Mexicans cannot feasibly live there on a standard salary.
Look past the charming cafes, flashy apartments, and you'll see this capital city for what it's becoming, a refuge for migrants.
I grew up in New York, LA, Atlanta, Georgia.
Perhaps not the border crossing you expected. Americans.
Like, you see these guys, it's always the same. It's the same types of people. You don't see them with any Mexicanos. They're not hanging out with any people that are actually from the country. They just hang out in their little groups, and they don't talk to anybody else except when they have to. And then they just drive the price up of everything. It's actually disgusting. Gentrifiers are a huge problem, I'm telling you. And they don't see anything wrong. I'm not saying that it's wrong to go to another place, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you do that, pay the taxes in that area so you're contributing to the economy, right? Not just through the taxes that are added, the VAT that's added to the prices of goods and services. Pay taxes so you can actually help the locals to some degree through whatever the government means or whatever. Right? That's one. Speak the language. These guys, none of them are speaking Spanish. And I know they're on their they do their little FaceTimes to their friends that are also, in Atlanta, in LA. Oh my God, I'm in Mexico, talking crap back and forth. They're not speaking the language at all. They have no desire to learn the language. It's disgusting, I'm telling, and they're doing this everywhere. In Medellin, it's la problema misma. De verdad, I'm telling you, they go into Medellin in Colombia. The same thing. When during the pandemic, when a lot of people were going to, the tech workers, the digital nomads, when they were going to La Ciudad de Mexico, a lot of them was going to Colombia because Colombia has an even lower cost of living. Granted, it's a little bit more dangerous, but the weather is much better than it is in La Ciudad de Mexico. And like I said, it's a lower cost of living in terms of housing prices and the cost of goods and services, food, transportation, so on and so forth. The same thing is happening in Medellin. El Poblado that's one of their rich neighborhoods in Medellin. Is El Poblado y La Urles. Those places are like the top-notch spots. Of course, if you go down south, I think there's Sabaneta and Envigado as well. But most of the foreigners that go to Colombia, they go to Medellin. Sorry, much more specifically, they go to Agua Catala in Poblado y La Urles. And that place is cooked. There's no way a Colombian whose earning potential is not even near that of a digital nomad from the United States or Western Europe or Australia or Canada. If a Colombian goes through El Poblado and would like to buy something to eat, the prices are inflated to the max. If they would like to have a one-bedroom apartment, say in La Provenza, which is, I don't know why you would do that. That's the most caliente tourist zone in the goddamn country. De verdad. They cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment in La Provenza, in El Poblado. The prices are just out of control because all of the landlords understand the large influx of these gentrifiers, of these tourists, and they're charging them an arm and a leg for them to reside in the country. It's so crazy because it happened here. Like if my apartment here in New York City, if it was not rent stabilized, best believe I would be live streaming or doing reaction content on the goddamn sidewalk because the rent in this place, it's like $3,600 a month for a one bedroom. That's just all that money is going towards the rent. We got to buy food now. And we're not even going to talk about grocery prices. Let's keep going, man.
Leaving pricey U.S. cities, heading south to work from home.
In this episode, our Latin American correspondent, Josue, will investigate the ongoing situation in Mexico City through the perspectives of locals, Americans, other foreigners, and local activists doing their best to bring awareness to the problem.
Perfecto. Ya estamos aquí con Fernando Bustos, quien es profesor de filosofía, entre otras cosas. Primero, antes que nada, me gustaría que en palabras más coloquiales me pudieras explicar lo que es la gentrificación para la gente que no está acostumbrada a este término.
Por ponerlo en términos bastante fáciles, la gentrificación es un fenómeno en el cual gente que tiene como mayor poder adquisitivo llega a vivir a determinadas zonas y comienza entonces a cambiar la forma de vida que tenía esa colonia, esa ciudad, esa calle, y al mismo tiempo, justo porque tienen mayor poder adquisitivo y tienen como otro tipo de gustos y demás, comienzan a abrir entonces, no sé, como panaderías.
Right. They infiltrate like a virus. And then because they have superior purchasing power, they infiltrate like a virus, and then they sell goods and services that are not in line with the tradition of the country that they're opening the business in. For example, what is it? Un panelaria de Francia.
Francesas, lugar que sea como un poquito como más bonito, por así decirlo, como Estados Unidos, Europa, cosas por el estilo. Y esto al mismo tiempo entonces comienza a hacer que cierren tiendas y que la gente que ya vivía ahí se comience a ir a otros lugares porque se encarecen los precios.
Activists say the formula is simple. As Mexico has sought to attract remote workers with higher purchasing power, it's created more inequality for Mexicans.
O sea, por ejemplo, hoy en día, por poner un ejemplo sencillo, hoy en día puedes ir, no sé, a clases, que aquí hay muchas de lugares de clases de yoga, y ahora las clases las dan a veces en inglés, ¿no? Es decir, con que haya una persona que hable inglés y si el resto hablan español, de pronto las clases te las dan en inglés.
No mames! The entitlement is crazy. The fact that there's yoga classes in La Ciudad de Mexico, first of all. And then two, my guy is talking about how, it's okay, that is a thing. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily a thing in La Ciudad de Mexico. But first of all, the fact that they're even facilitating or they're inspired to facilitate yoga classes, Pilates classes in Mexico is definitely due to Western influence. That's one. Two, if there's one guy speaking English in there, they got to change the whole class, the language for the whole class. And I'm telling you, I could imagine, because if you don't do that, these guys, these gentrifiers are they pink bellied. I'm telling you, they're soft as hell. If they didn't do that, the teacher didn't do that, these guys are going to get on social media, make some TikTok saying, oh my God, I went to La Ciudad de Mexico. The only problem is that I went to a yoga studio and then they didn't speak in English for me. They were speaking in Spanish. I didn't really understand it. So they're not accommodating to foreigners. It's when in Rome, do as the Romans do. These guys really do that. All these gentrifiers, all these digital nomads, I promise you they have Yelp accounts. A lot of their social media accounts are just about complaining about countries that they refuse to integrate in. Tradition-wise and language-wise, culture-wise. Dead serious. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's disgusting. I remember 2022, I went to Portugal, right? Because my mom lives in Portugal. Lisboa. There was a CrossFit class. The guy was speaking in Portuguese, and he asked me if, okay, you don't understand Portuguese, would you like to get the class in English? I'm like, hell no. No. I'm just gonna I'm gonna try my best to tie in what I'm seeing the people do in response to the sentences that you tell them, like the sounds from the sentences, because I don't know Portuguese. So I tried my best. I was just copying these guys and so on and so forth. I'm just trying to learn. I don't know much. Eu falo pouco português. I know a little bit of Portuguese, but I'm not going to sacrifice the comfort of the entire classroom, right? Because I'm just some extranjero trying to understand how to do CrossFit. That's corny as hell.
Entonces también en muchos restaurantes, en muchas cafeterías, ahora las cartas también están más que nada en inglés o tienen los anuncios afuera en inglés. Vivo aquí en México, no tendría necesidad a final de cuentas de saber hablar inglés. Cuando yo voy a Estados Unidos o al país que sea, Francia, Japón, pues yo no voy esperando que den una clase en mi idioma solamente porque estoy yo, ¿no? Es decir, yo trato de adaptarme un poco al lugar a donde voy. Si voy a Estados Unidos, lo más fácil, pues intento saber un poquito de inglés para poder entrar a esa clase, ¿no?
Do you speak Spanish?
Sí.
Your favorite words in Spanish? Favorite words?
Mis palabras favoritos. Echar para atrás y no mames. Sí.
Okay. Bad words. Okay. Nice.
No sé, incluso siento que se pierde también como un poco de sentido de comunidad, ¿no? Y de pronto todos los días eran gringos y gringos diferentes, que yo siempre sentirme como un extranjero en mi mismo país, en mi misma colonia.
Let's pause for a moment and talk about gentrification. It's a polarizing buzzword that often divides people into two camps. On one side, you have people who see it as a great across-the-board thing. The neighborhood gets cleaned up, crime goes down, and home values rise.
For millions of people my age, that is a dream.
Then on the other side, you have those who view it as a form of colonization and cultural erasure.
Gentrification is genocide.
But it's important to understand that gentrification doesn't begin maliciously. Let's use the US as an example. Hipsterism, as we know it today, began in New York City in the early 2000s. The first hipsters were suburban-raised millennials who adapted grunge and lumberjack fashion forms that were popular in Minneapolis and the Pacific Northwest in the late 90s. Most of the original hipsters were the grandchildren of white Americans who fled the inner cities in the mid-1960s during desegregation and a mass exodus known as white flight. The construction of newly built all-white suburbs and Levittowns and the farmlands outside cities like Philadelphia was more than a geographic resettlement. It was essentially a mass divestment from the cities, which resulted in a near total transferring of what Josue's interviewee calls purchasing power away from the urban centers into these private redlined communities. This, in turn, created half a century of economic apartheid, in which you basically had two parallel societies, the cities and the suburbs, existing in complete isolation from each other. Throughout the 80s and 90s,
Okay, I understand that. Of course, there is some history, and of course, gentrification naturally didn't start maliciously, right? These guys were just trying to escape these towns. I understand that. How gentrification could sort of be fixed. I'm not saying that it is bad to relocate or to migrate to another place that you find favorable, right? Because you're interested in the place, you know? My thing is, one, integrate in the culture. If you're going to a foreign country, learn the language. Like my guy said in the goddamn restaurant with Josue. He goes to Estados Unidos. He doesn't have to, he's not going around expecting people to speak to him in Spanish in Midtown Manhattan or like in goddamn Fort Lauderdale or goddamn California, San Francisco. No, he's in a place where they primarily speak English. And so he has to learn some phrases and sentences in English in order to get along. That's what it is. He's completely disgusted at the fact that these guys are coming over and not trying to learn Spanish at all. And the fact that a lot of the places that he used to go to, a lot of las tiendas, are closed down for French bakeries and goddamn Thai food in Mexico. What? Then that's my thing. Integrate into the culture. Number two, negotiate with the landlords. If clearly the landlords are charging you rents that you are familiar with in Mexico, where the GDP is way lower than your native country, then go somewhere else. Say, refuse it and then go somewhere else. Pay what the locals pay. That's what it is. Try to open your horizons, broaden your horizons, speak to the locals, learn some Spanish. In this example, La Ciudad de Mexico, learn some Spanish, speak with the locals. What are you paying, right? Or just ask some questions, just try to get along, and then pay what they pay. Do not pay the inflated rate because that's going to ruin it, not only for the natives, but for the people that come afterwards. Because essentially it's just going to have like some sort of colonized gated part of the country that you're interested in that has the same rent prices as the United States. Some metropolitan areas in the United States. This is what happened in Poblado in Colombia is crazy. If you want to stay in what do you call it? El Poblado for like a month, the rent is like 1,500. Normally, Colombianos cannot pay for that. That's a lot of money, but we see it as normal. And the fact that we're accepting this is that we're validating that behavior, that crazy houndish behavior from the landlords. I'm telling, we don't think, man. We don't think at all. I'm telling you.
Cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York City spiraled into chaos and disrepair, while suburbia and its sprawl became larger and larger, even connecting metro areas like Chicago and Milwaukee. But there was one problem that the architects of white flight didn't consider, which is the mass loss of what's called cultural capital that came as a result of isolation. The first generation born into a post-white flight reality were the boomers. It should come as no surprise that they loved it and appreciated it. After all, most of their parents were hard-scrabble World War II vets who grew up in a world with no suburbs, so a white picket fence in a big backyard was like a utopia. The children of the boomers, Gen Xers, kind of liked the suburbs, but were showing some signs of angst. But the generation after them, the millennials, they envisioned a vibrant new life, a world beyond cul-de-sacs and strip malls. Put simply, they wanted to be around culture, eat interesting food, hear different languages, and just not be bored. And so a migration called reverse white flight began. It's generally acknowledged that the first hipster neighborhood in America was Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a historically Jewish, black,
dead ass. Like, it's crazy. Williamsburg is cooked. When I was growing up, my mom always told me, Sombra, never take the G train, never go to Williamsburg, whatever you do. It was dangerous as hell. Dead serious. Williamsburg was run down. It wasn't developed at all. Now they got an Equinox in Williamsburg. They got a Whole Foods in Williamsburg. They developed Domino Park by the old Domino Sugar Factory in Williamsburg. Right next to that little promenade walk in Domino, the developed Domino Park. Got a little volleyball court, sand, by the way, constantly cleaned up, right? Cleaned by the employee that works there. Little taco spot, overpriced tacos. No Mexicans working there. They got all these expensive restaurants littered all around Bedford Ave. That's the strip that goes through Williamsburg. It's cooked right now. We could look up the price of a 1-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg. Way more than this. And I already told you $3,600 is for a 1-bedroom apartment here. It's cooked. The people that are over there, they're some of the most pompous, like uptight, complaining, out of touch people you will ever meet in this life. Dead serious. Next to the guys that live in Mayfair, London. Dead serious. It's cooked. It's so finished in Williamsburg. You don't even want to go there to hang out. Like, it's just so corny. Dead serious. Like,
in Dominican area, where Vice moved their headquarters in 2001. The complete cycle of turning parts of the neighborhood from diverse cultural corridors to flat corporate business parks took about 15 years. And there's actually a science to how gentrification works. Tulane University professor Richard Campanella broke it down into a 4-phase model. Phase 1 is the arrival of starving artist types, legitimate, penniless, as he calls them, gutter punks, because he's from New Orleans, who are looking for a cheap place to live that's a reasonable commuting distance from upscale cultural centers. These types are often troubled. They use drugs and drink heavily, and for certain, never open any businesses, and so don't actively displace anyone. What they
hilarious. I think we're at probably this phase right now in Colombia. Like, we just have a lot of sex tourism that's going on over there. A lot of these guys use excessive amount of drugs. They drink a lot, which is explicative of the situation that's been going on with a lot of the people the extranjeros, the foreigners that are going over there, getting robbed, drugged. Because I'm not saying all the time they're in the wrong, the foreigners, but a lot of the times these guys are partying very, very heavily. They're throwing a lot of money around, and they're making themselves a target for a lot of the Colombians, right? Speaking loudly in English or whatever their native language is, which is not Spanish, most of the time. And so they make themselves a target. So I think, just circling back, I think we're at this phase, the starving artist phase in Colombia right now.
do, though, is signal safety that makes way for the arrival of Phase 2. Phase 2 is hipsters, but Campanella calls them.
We're at Phase 2, actually. There's Phase 2 in Medellin. They have a WeWork space in Medellin. No mames. No mames. None of the Colombianos are going in there. They have a WeWork space in Medellin.
The creative class. Those in the creative class fetishize the starving artist types and are often semi-transient, meaning they kind of follow cool around the country. Unlike the broke bohemians, hipsters were typically college-educated, hyper-liberal, and usually open businesses, like coffee shops, organic food stores, juice bars, yoga studios, barbershops with exposed brick inside, vegan co-ops, and essentially introduce oat milk to the hood. Gradually, the area becomes a colony of the greater hipster network and begins seeing cross-traffic from cities like Portland, Oregon, who begin imposing their aesthetics and cultural customs onto the area. However, rent and cost of living itself does not actually rise until the third phase begins, which Campanella calls the bourgeoisie bohemian phase. This is marked by the arrival of art collectors, people who refer to themselves as socialites, Burning Man camp leaders, cultural investors, and most importantly, real estate developers with a taste for the hip, who are aware of the area's skyrocketing cultural capital and see a massive business opportunity, which often takes the form of a city-sponsored arts district. It's between phase 2 and 3 that you find the most tension, because that's when the displacement happens. In this phase, entire neighborhoods are often bulldozed to make room for luxury hotels, trendy fine dining restaurants, and hip corporate storefronts, resulting in unaffordability for both locals who are totally out of this.
I know that happened, like I was referring to in the beginning of this reaction video. I know in Roma Norte, the New York Times article, a lot of the Mexicans that were in the comment section were talking heavy about how it almost happened like within the course of a few months, a lot of their families were like uprooted, right? Because of the landlords tripling the price on them like overnight, when they had experiences with some of these bohemian bourgeoisie coming into the building and paying this exaggerated price for rent and realizing that, oh, I can make so much money off these guys. Why am I only accepting a fraction of that rent that I just collected from the foreigner, from the native? This is just a scourge.
coolness matrix, and the hipsters and bohemians that made the area cool in the first place. After the shiny new apartments are built and the landlord raises the rent, the fourth phase begins, which is the arrival of the rich, the young professional class, like tech bros and finance guys who have absolutely no interest in anything cool and view cultural capital as basically meaningless. By the time phase 4 is complete and yuppies have taken over, you're left with a sterile, metallic ghost town full of empty apartments that basically nobody wants to live in. The developers who banked on the cool factor are bummed, and the cycle of gentrification has now restarted on the outer radius of where it began, spreading like a nuclear bomb in all directions, destroying everything in its wake. In New York, you could say the bomb was dropped in Williamsburg. The blast radius is currently incinerating Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, Ridgewood, and further out into the boroughs. In Mexico City, it's safe to say the G-bomb was dropped in a neighborhood called Roma Norte, a historic district just southwest of the center of town. I'm not sure if you know this, but Mexico City is unbelievably large in size and has a higher population than New York. So there was a ton of neighborhoods for transplants to choose from. But Roma Norte's primary cultural appeal was its food. It's been a hotspot for Mexican cuisine since the 1950s.
Dude, I mean, you can get, some chilaquiles or some tacos for 4 pesos.
Chilaquiles and tacos. There's so much more to the Mexican cuisine than these things. No mames. A chile relleno. There's so many things. It's crazy that they're naming like the most basic type of food. It's crazy. It's so crazy, man.
And it's like fucking good, I love it. It's great. The prices are great here.
You feel they upgrade the prices?
No, yeah, I feel like in some places the prices are going up. I mean, Roma Norte is ridiculous. Condesa is so expensive now. I looked out because I feel like Juarez, it's still a little local, but it's like the Brooklyn of New York.
In the center.
Yeah, in the center. It feels like it's like an old New York, Okay.
Beyond cultural appeal, another factor that makes cities ripe for gentrification are natural disasters. One example would be New Orleans, Louisiana. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck the city, killing 1,800 people and displacing half of New Orleans' population. One of the hardest hit neighborhoods was the Ninth Ward. Because of the city's levees breaking, the lower Ninth Ward was almost totally flat.
Yeah, so we're going to cut this off here just because it's going to go very, very long. To be honest, we got like 14 more minutes. It's a lot. But of course, yeah, just to finish up what he's going to say, honestly, when there's like a disaster such as like the hurricane that happened, right, in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, the fires that happened in LA, right, it gives the developers a chance to now create a spot where they're only inviting a certain type of clientele, which are people that, a small amount of people, by the way, that have an excessive amount of money to spend for rent or to pay an excessive amount to own the house. It's absolutely insane. Let me just see what some of the comments are saying. So he said barbershops with exposed brick inside. Yeah, for sure. The irony is striking. Americans often claim that Mexicans come to the U.S. to take jobs and seek a better life, while many Americans are now moving to Mexico in search of a better life, driving up local prices. In both cases, it's the pressures of capitalism and wealth inequality at play. Dead serious, that's really what it is. Gentrification ruined everything. It ruined everything. Introduce oat milk to the hood. Probably the best gentrification of definition of gentrification. Dead ass. Yo. He said, yep, I end up feeling like a foreigner in my own neighborhood because these guys, it's a whole bunch of them that come through. They feel entitled as hell. They got their dogs with long leashes. It happens here. Long leashes around the whole block, the whole sidewalk. You bump into them or the dog. They ready to call the police on you because you're harassing them. These guys are so cupcake. It's not even funny. It's not even, I'm telling you, gentrifiers are they're a virus. They're like poison to Mother Earth. I'm telling you, they're a problem. They're an issue. I understand that it came from a beginning where they were trying to find culture, right? But now it's evolved into something completely different. I really am not down with it. And the fact that they're not even interested in integration with other cultures is absolutely disgusting too. The culture of the place that they're going to. So with that being said, that is the end of this SombraReacts, man. If you guys enjoyed that kind of content, like, comment, subscribe, of course. Share the video with some peers. Like I said, I have the Patreon up. Join the Patreon. I have a free weekly newsletter where I talk about a lot of these issues. I write about them because I like to write. So check it out, updated weekly, as I just said. And then also, if you want to get access to the exclusive content, we have that, where I have a lot of interviews that go on, and just a lot of exclusive content like that as well. So stay radiant, guys. I'm going to see you guys in the next SombraReacts. Woo!